All right, what we have over here is a sacrum. I guess it's over here. Yeah, there we go. There's a sacrum right there. And this is the person's butt, like this, okay? So this is their back. And when we're looking at the sacrum, we need to try to figure out what's wrong with the sacrum. So the first thing you do to figure out if the sacrum even has any problems is you have the person sit down on a chair. They call this the seated flexion test. And you place your thumbs right here, and this place is called the Sacral Slope. And you feel there, and as the person bends over and touches their toes, you feel a certain movement that you learn in class, okay? It's like whichever one moves last and whatever. Sometimes they say which one moves first. It depends on who your teacher is sometimes. So anyway, whatever side that has the movement, they'll say it's positive on that side. So positive sacral seated flexion test on the right, or let's say, or it's on the left. Okay, you can get right or left positive sacral sulcus testing, and after you get that, that's a good indication. Now you know the person has some kind of sacral problem. Still, even if you don't get positive right or left, it's possible the person can have a really unusual kind of sacral problem called a bilateral positioning, but that's basically where, if you were to draw an axis line here, like either this entire thing is like bent towards you, you'd say it's like posterior, or this entire thing is posterior, and then this one would be anterior, or vice versa, whatever. But anyway, in that case, it wouldn't even be positive in that instance. But there are other ways of figuring that out. We're not going to worry too much about that in this video. Mostly what we're going to focus on this video is figuring out whether or not it has an appearance like this. And then this would be the kind of more shaded area, which means this one would be more on this side up here. They call this the sacral sulci. Up here would be more anterior, or sometimes they say more deep, okay? And down here would also be more anterior, or more, yeah, I think that's inferior. But anyway, crap, I can't remember. Just worry about anterior for now, okay? So they'd say it's more anterior on this side, and then over here on the other side, this one would be more more posterior, or more shallow, okay? So that's what it would look like. So it's either following this model, or it's following a different model entirely, in which when you go and you feel here, you find that you feel here, and let's say this one's more anterior, but you go down here, and this one's more more posterior. And then you go over here, and you find this one over here is more posterior, but this one down here is more anterior. And so you get this weird, it looks like that. And I can't think of the sacrum actually moving. I know some people say that it actually is moving, but I actually think of it as the structures around the sacrum are in a position that would make it appear as if this is what the sacrum is doing. But don't make your mind explode trying to figure it out. But the only way I could figure it out was just that the structures surrounding the sacrum are positioned in such a way that they're coming out here, and they're coming out here, and they're further down there, and further there. Yeah, but anyway, don't worry about it. Don't kill yourself figuring that out. So anyway, it could be either this way, or of course it could be the opposite, where it's dark over here and light over here, whatever. But the point is that there's really two models it can be. Either the whole side is dark altogether, or it's kind of this sort of checkerboard appearance. So how do you figure out which one it is? Well, you have to monitor the sacral sulci, and you have to monitor the ILAs, inferior lateral angle, which is like positioned down here. You feel those, and if it's more, when you put your thumbs on them and kind of even it up like this, you'll find one's a little further forward, one's a little further back. Okay, so whatever that is, you mark that down, and you say it's anterior or posterior. So There's another method that you can figure this out, and that's actually by looking at L5 vertebrae. Okay, so L5 vertebrae is going to have some diagnosis. It's either going to be flexed, it's going to be extended, or it's going to be neutral. Okay, if it's flexed or extended, side bending and rotation are going to happen the same direction. So it could be side bent right, rotated right, or side bent left, rotated left. And if it's neutral, then it's a type 1 in mechanics, which means it's going to be side bent left, rotated right, or it could be side bent right, rotated left. Okay, so now you're like, all right, now that I got that information with what's happening with L5, I can make a diagnosis as to what's happening with my sacrum. So if it's a certain type. So if it's this type where one side's dark and the other one's light, or, you know what I mean, one whole side's more anterior, one side's more posterior, what I can do is you just basically look at this S here, okay? S standing for side bending. And whatever the side bending says is what you're going to say is your axis, okay? So I didn't mention this earlier, but whenever you look at one of these things, let's say it was positive on this side over here. If it's positive on this side, let me erase some of this stuff. If it's positive on that side, that means that the axis is on the opposite side. So here's our axis, and that's what sides it was positive on, which means that when we did our seated flexion test, it was positive on that side. That means our axis runs this way. So as I'm writing this out, axis here, this is a right axis, so I would say this is something on a right axis. So which way is it facing on a right axis? So let's say that this side right here was more anterior than this side. So this is posterior, this is anterior, this is posterior. So let's say we had that finding. So I know that it's on a right axis, and I know that this part up here is facing to the, if I were to hold my sacrum like this, and I were to put an axis running like this, whatever, is that right? Well, that's the way it should be. Whoa, that's the way it should be, but whatever. It would be like this on that axis, okay? So if it's going like this on that axis, then that tells me that it must be looking to the right on a right axis. So this would be a right on right. So you're like, all right, so if I know that, then you should be able to tell what's happening on L5, okay? So on L5, the axis is represented by the side bending, and the rotation is represented by the opposite of the rotation component, okay? Or the first number, the way it's pointing is on the opposite of the rotation. So I said that wrong. So that means that L5 must be side bent right and rotate, because this is same here. Okay, so, and it must be rotated the opposite of this guy, which would be left then. So this must be L5, side bent right, rotated left. Since those are rotation and side bent in opposite directions, I would know this would have neutral mechanics, so it would be neutral, side bent right, rotated left. Now, that is helpful to figure out what the diagnosis is. Let's go on to diagnosing unilateral sacral extension or flexion. So, I went back as far as I can go. Alright, it's alright. That's what we have erasers for. So now let's work with these unilaterals. So with the unilateral, the way that it works is it's like that kind of checkerboard thing I was showing you earlier. Oops. Checkerboard thing I was showing you earlier, where it's like this. And let's say you're measuring the up here. Let's say that it was positive. Say it was positive there. And you go and you feel this thing, and when you feel the sacral sulci, it's posterior here. Let's say it was anterior here, which posterior would mean that it was shallow, and anterior would mean that it was deep. And you come down here to the ILAs, and you find that this ILA is anterior here, and this one over here is posterior here. So how are you going to figure out a diagnosis with this? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to just know that since, I'll go ahead and make this dark because it's anterior, so I could shade it. You're going to know this is going to be a unilateral sacral. It's going to be extension or flexion. So since it's posterior, posterior means extension. Okay? So this is unilateral sacral extension, and it's going to be on the right. So it's a unilateral sacral extension on the right. Okay? Hopefully this was helpful for you, figuring out how to do these. And best of luck.